Hey crew, it's Pitt, and I'm back with some more esoterica. Today we are diving back into the works of Mr. Eliphas Levi. This is Transcendental Magic, it's Doctrine and Ritual. We are reading aloud and discussing as we go along the various points brought to light by the text. It is not the format for everyone, but people do find value in it, so you are more than welcome to tag along as we continue our exploration. Before we begin, however, if you are unfamiliar with me, any of my unconventional beliefs, or if at any point I lose you in the terminology, there will be several playlists linked in the corner above, in the box down below, along with the original source material and the link for my book, so that you can get a better understanding of who I am and why I say the things that I do. A particular note today is going to be the standalone video about astrology, where we talk about some of these concepts and what they actually mean. With that being said, let us dive in and continue our exploration of Transcendental Magic, its Doctrine and Ritual, with Chapter 17, Astrology. Stella os inflexus. Of all the arts which have originated in ancient Magian wisdom, astrology is the most misunderstood. No one believes any longer in the universal harmonies of nature and in the necessary interlacing of all effects with all causes. That is probably for a reason, right? I just did a study of astrology, and that's what the video is. We went through all of the signs, what they all mean, the houses, all of that stuff, and there's not a whole lot there for me that is verifiable, right? Tarot is different than astrology, even though most people link those together. Tarot is looking forward into the future just a little bit to see what's going to happen. Astrology is assigning to the planets your actions. Those are two completely separated ideas. They're not even really the same. Now, the reason why tarot works, like if you look and it's like Gemini reading, Pisces reading, Aquarius reading, it's because it is about self-identification. You have identified with this group, and because you have identified with this group, the things that say may have some relevance to you. Right? It's the same as if you were to identify as a Republican or a Democrat and get a tarot reading based off of that. Exactly the same significance. It is a self-identifier. I have not seen any reason to believe that there are influences from the planets in a way that is implied by astrology. This is how your day is going to go because the moon is in Saturn, right? Or the moon is in conjunction with Saturn and Uranus, or I keep trying to name a horse or a zodiacal sign, and I keep naming planets, but you know what I mean. Like, where your particular planet is does not seem to have a whole lot of basis or bearing in anything actually factually correct, right? Whereas with tarot, it was a whole different thing, right? That was independent corroboration of these readings at least coinciding with each other, right? And if that's confusing, the tarot playlist will definitely help you out with that. All right, back to the text. Moreover, true astrology, that which connects the unique and universal dogma of the Kabbalah, became profaned among the Greeks and among the Romans of the decline. Okay, so right now, this is not correct. Straight off the top, astrology did not come from the Kabbalah. Once again, see the video where we show that in antiquity, in Egypt, for instance, or Babylon, for instance, we see these things happening, right? They are using the zodiacal signs, even if they don't necessarily correlate with the names that we give them, for the purposes that we use, right? That is an old art, much older than Christianity, for sure, even older than Judaism, for sure. And so Kabbalism was pieced together long after we had the Greeks and the Romans. Now, that's not to say that there wasn't some overlap, right? The Romans ruled the area and all of that, but the Greeks, the Babylonians, the Egyptians, the Far Eastern Indians, so that there's no confusion, they all used astrology. The Mayans, the Aztecs, they used astrology. All of that is beyond the unique and universal dogma of the Kabbalah. The Kabbalah is a control system, and it is based upon something fundamentally flawed, fundamentally broken, fundamentally incorrect, and therefore you can't get a whole lot of correct out of something that is broken at its base. If that is confusing to you, check out the Bible study. Back to the text. The doctrine of the seven spheres and the three mobilities, primitively issuing from the Sephirotic decade. The character of the planets governed by the angels, whose names have been changed into those of the pagan divinities, or the exact opposite of this sentence. The influence of the spheres on one another, the destiny attached to numbers, the scale of proportion between the celestial hierarchies corresponding to the human hierarchies. All this has been materialized and degraded into superstition by genothelialical soothsayers and erectors of horoscopes during the decline in the Middle Ages. All right, so first off, once again, it is older than Kabbalah. Second off, none of the zodiacal signs have any correlation to the Kabbalah as far as I am aware, right? There is the sacrifice of the lamb that can be corresponded to the ram if you try really hard, right? There's bulls. You sacrifice bulls and you can correlate the Taurus if you try really hard, but you've got to try really hard. It has to already be on your mind. You're not going to just intrinsically go through and see the zodiac and be like, oh, that's got Jewish origins. At all. At all. At all. The restoration of astrology to its primitive purity would be, in a sense, the creation of an entirely new science. Here, let us attempt merely to indicate its first principles with their more immediate and approximate consequences. Now, I want to put a caveat into this, right? I don't place a whole lot of faith into astrology. There has not been any reason to do so. I've never had a horoscope that was surprisingly accurate. At all. At all. Even like the more personalized ones. No correlation whatsoever. I've never had an experience where it bore true in the slightest. But that doesn't mean that there cannot be influence by the planets at the moment of conception, for instance, right? Or at probably a lot less at the moment of your birth. It probably would be significantly more influential from the moment of conception up to, say, 4 months. When the very process of you being put together and knitted together is actually happening, right? The DNA is unfolding and the various pieces are creating themselves. Then the electromagnetic influence of these celestial bodies, which they have, may shape in some way, unknown, but probably, the magnetics of you. Right? If you're unaware, you have magnetics too. You are surrounded by a magnetic aura. You have 7 magnetic auras or magnetic chakras within yourself. They influence all of you, right? Everything is the electromagnetics of existence. Everything is held together by magnetics. And so there can be some influence from these planets. It's probably just not the way that we understand it. And that is something that you'll never be able to convince an astrologer of, right? When the influence is almost certainly not going to be when you're born. It is almost certainly going to be when you were made, because, various pieces are aligning themselves in various ways. And so if there is influence, it is more likely to be influenced during the formation rather than the actual spitting out of. And I wanted to clarify that. Like I said that in the astrology video, but most people are not going to make it back over there, and that's fine, right? I give you the resource so that you can go if you're interested, but you don't have to. All right. We have said that the astral light receives and preserves the impressions of all visible things. It follows from this that the daily position of the heaven is reflected in this light, which, being the chief agent of life, operates the conception, gestation, and birth of children by a sequence of apparatuses naturally designed to this end. Now, conception, gestation, and birth, right? That is giving at least a little bit of the credit about what I just talked about. I really don't think it's going to have a whole lot about the birth. I really do think that if there is going to be some influence, it will be during the conception and gestation. That is even because of where the planets are. Now, how we are going to track that, who knows? I don't know that we ever will. Maybe AI can do something. It's got to do something useful, right? But it is entirely possible that you're influenced when you're being made, less likely that you're being influenced after you're born, even now. Now, if this light be sufficiently prodigal of images to impart to the fruit of the womb the visible imprints of a maternal fantasy or appetite, remember he believes that if the mother really truly desires, she can have a Down child, right? That's his belief. If she is imagining these things, then that is what is going to come to light, again, without any evidence whatsoever. Still more will it transmit to the plastic and indeterminate temperament of a newly born child the atmospheric impressions and diverse influences which, in the entire planetary system, are consequent at a given moment upon such or such particular aspect of the stars. Again, I do not hold that. Nothing is indifferent in nature. A stone more or a stone less upon a road may break or completely modify the destinies of the greatest men or even the largest empires. Still more must the position of this or that star in the sky have an influence on the child who is born. That is not a logical conclusion, right? There's a fire down the street, so I need water in my house. Yeah, kinda, but not really, right? Still more must the position of this or that star. Why? The stone not being in a bridge can cause a collapse. That can affect somebody's life, right? The stone not being correct in a roadway causes a pothole. That can affect somebody's life. That is not a necessary direct correlation to astrology. Are you kidding me? Are you out of your damn mind? Like, again, I can be wrong. It is highly unlikely at this point for this topic. I'm open, right? I am open to ideas. I am willing to change my mind about things. I have seen zero evidence that there is an astrological correlation to daily events in people's lives. There has been zero, oh my God, that horoscope is perfectly on point. In the exact same way that when you get a fortune cookie, it's not on point. Now, with tarot, I have evidence. I have seen with my own eyes correlation between widely disparate channels on the same day pulling the same cards. Sometimes, even often, in the same order, in the same spread, with the same meanings attached to it, across a wide spectrum of people who are putting them out at the same time. They're not watching somebody else's and planning it. It's happening because of the energies. That is something that is outside correlation. I have zero outside correlation for zodiac at all. Maybe you do. If you do, drop it in the box down below. Let me know your experience where astrology has actually hit it on the head. I'm interested. I just am highly doubtful. Especially because Mr. Levi is placing so much value on it. What we have seen so far is he is not very good at this. He doesn't understand the concepts of what he is talking about on a fundamental level. Even the concepts as they were assigned with the misunderstanding of what they actually mean. Right? There are several things that I define completely differently than other people do. And mine seems to work a little bit better. And that's not me trying to be prideful. It's just simply how it is. So if there is, in your experience, I got this horoscope and it hit exactly nail on the head, give me your experience down below. And let me know, because quite honestly, I have zero reason to believe in astrology at all. And I am open. I investigated it. I did a whole video on it. And here's the thing, right? My chart says that I'm a Gemini. But if you look at the actual stars in the actual sky, that doesn't make any sense. Back to the text. Influence on the child who is born, who enters by the very fact of his birth into the universal harmony of the sidereal world. Now, that is true. When you join in, you are part of the universal harmony. The stars are bound to one another by the attractions which hold them in equilibrium and cause them to move with uniformity through space. Yeah, right? Gravity is a thing. Electromagnetic stabilization is a thing. Electromagnetic harmony is a thing. And so, yeah, equilibrium. From all spheres unto all spheres, there stretch these indestructible threads of light. That is true, even if science does not necessarily want to admit that quite yet. See the Thunderbolts Project, they'll let you know about that. And there is no point upon any planet to which one of them is not attached. That may be true. It might be true. But again, this is highly, highly speculative, right? First off, we're pretty sure about the things that happen here on this planet. We're fairly certain about some of the things that happen on the moon. We are much less certain about anything that happens on the other planets. We have only sent satellites and research vessels to a couple of them. We only have some of the information that we would need to make this statement in a factual manner, right? There is no point upon any planet to which one of them is not attached. Now, this is talking about magnetics. This is talking about the foundation, right? I believe this. This is entirely possible. I firmly believe that this is even probable, but it is an assumption. You are not factually stating something. You are stating something that you believe to be factual. And there is a major difference between those two things. Back to the text. The true adept in astrology must, therefore, give heed to the precise time and place of the birth which is in question. Then, after an exact calculation of the astral influences, it remains for him to compute the chances of a state, that is to say, the advantages or hindrances which the child must one day meet by reason of position, relatives, inherited tendencies, and hence natural proclivities in the fulfillment of his destinies. Now, this is the part that's really, for me, not, right? Just because you are a Gemini does not mean that you are going to necessarily display the traits that are associated with the Geminis, right? The two-faced is one of those. Now, that's one of the more negative aspects. The ability to look at things from both sides, that's a thing, right? Gemini is famous for that. So is Pisces. Both of those happen to be in my chart, but they do the same thing. There are other signs that do the same thing. One of the problems, right? Here's one of the major problems with astrology, according to the study that I did. There are too many signs that say the exact same thing, right? If this was going to be a true, according to this date that you were born, this sign guides you and foundationally makes you who you are. That should be individual, right? It should not be no overlap between a Gemini and a Leo, or especially like a Gemini and a Cancer, where they're side by side, or Gemini and, Taurus prior, right? But you can find those. You can find not just like slight overlap, but like extensive overlap. These signs mean almost the exact same thing. And that's going to be a problem with the natural proclivities. If this were a true thing, then it would be more individualized to the signs. That is a major problem, right? The other thing is that you've got these things assigned to people. Most of them are positive attributes, right? There are a couple negative ones attached, but for the most part, they're positive attributes. They are things that people want to see in themselves. And so when you say that Cancer is generous, Pisces is generous, Aquarius is generous, Sagittarius is generous, right? That is spreading it out to a point where it doesn't even really have any relevance anymore. Everybody wants to be generous. Everybody wants to self-identify as this generous person. And so when you see this sign and you see someone who's a little bit generous, you're like, oh, it's because of their sign. Or maybe they were just raised right. And these are just a couple of the problems with astrology. Astrology is way too subjective for me, right? Tarot is fairly well divined, and I keep using that example because it really did, through experience, set itself apart as a method, right? There's a major difference for me between astrology and tarot. One of them appears to work, and one of them appears to not, and that is a big deal. All right. Hence natural proclivities and the fulfillment of his destinies. Finally, he will still have to take into consideration human liberty and its initiative should the child eventually come to be a true man. and to isolate himself by an intrepid will from fatal influences and from the chain of destiny. It will be seen that we do not allow too much to astrology. But so much as we leave it is indubitable. That is a big word. Indubitable means with no doubt. That is going to be a really hard one to fulfill. It is the scientific and magic calculus of probabilities. And again, I assign that much more to tarot, right? Tarot appears to be seeing very short distances into the future and seeing probabilities. That appears to be what tarot is, right? It's not a hard, fast, this thing is actually going to happen, but a, hey, be careful, this thing may happen, and may even probably happen, but not a guarantee that this thing will happen. I mean, there is a lot less to astrology. It's like the terms are much clearer, much more set in tarot than they are in astrology for me, and that's going to make all of the difference, right? The problem that I had with MBTI was that the terminology was not right. There was too much that could be taken as a subjective, and so I cleaned it, right? I reorganized it. I changed it pretty much completely. I kept the terms. I redefined what they meant into more objection, right? More objective, not objection, more objective terminology. Something that you can look at and objectively say, okay, that is things, as opposed to, well, he's using his emotions to figure something out, right? It's a whole different thing. The scientific part of it, that's going to be a problem for me, right? If this was a scientific art, I should be able to look at the position of the moon, if this is a true thing, right? The position of the moon and the stellar bodies, and know exactly what's going to happen. And that's just simply not a possibility, right? Or even something that seems reasonably certain. And again, that is simply not evidenced. All right, back to the text. Astrology is as ancient as astronomy. And indeed, it is more ancient. Okay. I was already incredulous, right? I was already casting great doubt in the first part of this. Astrology is as ancient as astronomy. It's going to be hard to prove either way, but where the position of the stars was probably first, and then over time we probably gradually created mythos behind those positions of the stars. So I wouldn't go as far as to say as ancient as, right? One derived from the other probably through time. That is a logical assumption. And indeed, it is more ancient is patently stupid, right? There is no way that you created the mythos before you actually observed the actual position, right? Astronomy is where the position of the stellar bodies are with no interpretation attached. As astrology is the observation of the stellar bodies with that information attached, these things that we later attach to it. And so there is no way, right? There is a slight chance that they were concurrent. It is almost impossible that it happened this way, that you had astrology first and then astronomy is simply logically improbable. But I'm not surprised to find that in this study. All seers of lucid antiquity have accorded it their fullest confidence, really. And see, this is why I am so hesitant to use all 100%, every, right? All is a big word, a very big word. First off, we do not have records of all seers of lucid antiquity. Right? There is not every seer that has ever existed has written this record and we have them to go back on. That has not happened. We do not have that all the seers of antiquity have accorded it their fullest confidence. That is not recorded. And so, where did you get this from? You just pulled it out of your ass? You just decided that this is a thing and now it is? Is that what's going on here? Because that appears to be what is going on here. I have decided that this thing is important and therefore it is going to be given my full confidence. Right? The logic chains are not happening here. Now, we must not condemn and reject in a shallow manner anything which comes before us protected and supported by such imposing authorities. Long and patient observations, conclusive comparisons, frequently repeated experiences must have led the old sages to their decisions, and to refute them, the same labor must be undertaken from an opposite standpoint. Okay, this is possible, but we do not have evidence of this, right? We do not have long and patient observations, conclusive comparisons, frequently repeated experiences. It is probable that that is what led to this, but it is not a certainty, right? It could just be mythology randomized so that people could understand it and then over time assign different values. That is much more probable. Paracelsus was perhaps the last of the great practical astrologers, and if this was truly an art, that would not be a thing. Right? If this was true knowledge, then we would have a better understanding. He cured diseases by talismans formed under astral influences. He distinguished upon all bodies the mark of their dominant star. There, according to him, was the true universal medicine, the absolute science of nature, lost by man's own fault and recovered only by a small number of initiates. To recognize the sign of each star upon men, animals, and plants is the true natural science of Solomon. Show me that in the Bible. Oh, you're dealing with the Kabbalah, which was pieced together later. I got you. That science, which is said to be lost, but the principles of which are preserved notwithstanding, are, as are all other secrets, in the symbolism of the Kabbalah. It will be readily understood that in order to read the stars, one must know the stars themselves. Yeah? Now, this knowledge is obtained by the Kabbalistic domification of the sky and by the understanding of the celestial planisphere, recovered and explained by Gaffarel. In this planisphere, the constellations form Hebrew letters, and the mythological features may be replaced by the symbols of the tarot. To this same planisphere, Gaffarel refers the origin of patriarchal writings, and in the chains of starry attraction, the first lineaments of primitive characters may very well have been found, in which case the celestial book would have served in the model of Enoch's, and the Kabbalistic alphabet would have been the synopsis of the entire sky. Okay, this is definitely reading something in there that you want to read in there, right? It's not that it is necessarily impossible, but have you ever played the game of connect the dots, right? You get a whole thing and it's got all these little numbers and the dots, and you can make a picture out of that, right? If you follow the numbers exactly, you can get a picture out of it. But if you don't follow the numbers exactly, you can create an entirely different picture by connecting the same dots in a different order. That is a possibility, and that explains this. Right, you've got the whole of the sky at night, clear, there's no light pollution. You can see all of the stars. You can absolutely find any shape that you want to find in that. Even if you limit it to the zodiacal, right, where the azimuth and all of that happens, even if you limit it to that particular part, you can still find all of the letters of the Hebrew alphabet. You can create them if you want. And that is almost certainly what happened here. It said we didn't get it because of the alphabet came later. This is not wanting in poetry, nor, above all, in probability. Wrong. And the study of the tarot, which is evidently the primitive and hieroglyphic work of Enoch, there is zero reason to believe that, as was divined by the erudite William Postel, is sufficient to convince us hereof. Okay, so first off, the tarot and astrology are linked because people have linked them, not necessarily because they have to be linked, right? Like we talked in the beginning about self-identification. We assign the properties of astrology to some of the cards. For instance, the moon represents Cancer. It's about nurturing, about coming out of your shell, about all of these other things. We assign that to the card, and that is a definition, so that when it comes out, these assignments are about that, right? It is not the entirety of tarot by a long shot, and probably not even necessarily connected, right? And so to link them in this way, right? It's not wanting in poetry or above all in probability. In the study of the tarot, which is evidently the primitive and hieroglyphic work of Enoch, right? That means by the evidence that we observe, it is coming from Enoch, right? This is a weird spelling of it, but it's Enoch. As was divined by the erudite William Postel, which means that he assumed it, right? He speculated about it. It may be true, but there is no reason to believe that it is absolutely true. In the exact same way that the things that I tell you of my own determination may be true, you should put them to the test and see whether it bears out. Looking at the tarot cards, now, I do not have the originals because they are not recorded, right? We have a couple of the Count de Goblins. They are not necessarily related to the tarot. Again, see the tarot playlist. And so this, while it is possible, is not above all in probability, right? It is not the definite. It is definitely not absolute. Back to the text. The signs imprinted in the astral light by the reflection and attraction of the stars is reproduced, therefore, as the sages have discovered, on all bodies which are formed by the conjunction of that light. Men bear the signs of their star on their forehead chiefly. Do y'all see a star? Do y'all see an explanation for a star? Do you see anything at all that relates at all to astrology? Right? Is it written on my head? Do I bear the sign of the star on my forehead? Is it in my hands? Right? And in their hands. Animals in their whole form and in their individual signs. So now you're assigning zodiac to the dogs. Gotcha. Plants in their leaves and seeds, minerals in their veins and their grain. What this is, this part right here, this whole little section right here, is attempting to force something into something, right? This is a self-insertion. You believe it and therefore it is true, right? Men bear their signs of the star on their forehead chiefly. I don't have any correlation to that. Right? I don't see the twins inscribed upon my forehead or Pisces or any of the other signs. None of that, right? Animals in their whole form. So this animal that is born under Gemini is going to be different than this exact same animal that is born under Pisces? Is that what you're trying to tell me? That this litter of puppies born under this sign is all going to be exactly the same? Is that what you're trying to tell me? Because you're wrong. Right? This is a self-insertion. I believe this to be true. Here's the evidence to prove that it is true, even though it is not evidence at all. The study of these characters was the entire life work of Paracelsus, and the figures on his talismans are the results of his researches. And again, I am going to point out that for me, there is no reason for any talismans. You can imbue talismans with power. That is your intention. That is doing so. It is not the signs that you make. It is not the inscriptions. It is not the gems or the stones or the sticks. None of that makes any difference. You can use any particular substance for any particular ritual without having any negative effects. It is all about your intention and about the energy that you invest. There is zero correlation between a talisman and being healed. At least in my experience, I was healed with no talismans. Not a single one. Back to the text. He has, however, left us no key to them because there was no key, right? So that the astro-kabbalistic alphabet, with its correspondences, still remains to be done. As regards publicity, the science of unconventional magical writing stopped with the planisphere of Gaffarel. The serious art of divination rests wholly in the knowledge of these signs. Chiromancy is the art of reading the writing of the stars and the lines of the hand. And physiognomy, seeks the same or analogous characters upon the countenance of its inquirers. I don't have a whole lot of experience with palmistry, or with what it says physiognomy. I think there's another word for it when you feel the lumps on somebody's head. Right? I don't believe those things are necessarily correct, but I do not have the experience to dismiss them out of hand. Like with astrology, I did the work. Right? We've got a video on it. I did the research, and there is no reason for me to believe these things. I haven't done that with palmistry. I haven't done that with the lumps on the head or the shape of the body or any of that. Most of those I dismiss out of hand, but that could be me being wrong, right? I am definitely entering into new territory from where I have ever been before, so. As a fact, big word, the lines formed on the human face by nervous contractions are determined fatally, and the radiation of the nervous tissue is absolutely analogous to those networks which are formed between the worlds by the chains of starry attraction. And again, you are dealing with some big words here, Mr. Levi, and it is not your forte. The fatalities of life are, therefore, written necessarily in our wrinkles, and at first glance frequently reveal upon the forehead of a stranger either one or more of the mysterious letters of the Kabbalistic planisphere. What letters do I have? What letters are up here? You want to see my wrinkles? There's my wrinkles. What letters do I have? Let me know in the comments if I got letters. Should the letter be jagged and laboriously inscribed, there has been a struggle between will and fatality, and in his most powerful emotions and tendencies, the individual's entire past manifests to the magus. From this, it becomes easy to conjecture the future, and if events occasionally deceive the sagacity of the diviner, he who has consulted him will remain none the less astounded and convinced by the superhuman knowledge of the adept. It is entirely possible to read people. People have been reading people for as long as there have been people. Palm readers, for instance, they read you when you walk in the room, but it's not because of the wrinkles in your face, right? They draw out conversation. They pull clues, and they're able to connect dots in their mind, and therefore they can give you a little bit of accurate representation of yourself. But if events occasionally deceive, the sagacity of the diviner is kind of like against what you have talked about previously about absolutes, right? It is therefore written necessarily in our wrinkles, and at first glance reveals upon the forehead of a stranger, right, the mysterious letters, and the letter is jagged or laborious. There's been a struggle in the most powerful emotions and tendencies. The entire past manifests to the magus. It becomes easy to conjecture the future. But if I'm wrong, I hate balls. Like, this is the kind of stuff that we saw when we were doing the Bible study, and it's like, well, if you don't believe this, you're going to hell, right? That's narcissism. If you don't take this as I am speaking it, then you're wrong. The human head is formed upon the model of the celestial spheres. Really? Really? Show me the planet that looks like a head. Like, there's a slight correlation. The planet does bulge in the middle from the rotation, so it's not exactly round, but it's a little ovoid, but it's in the wrong direction to be in correlation to the head. Like, annoying. It attracts and it radiates, and in the conception of a child, it attracts and it radiates, and in the conception of a child, this it is which first forms and manifests. Actually, no. The head is not the part that first manifests. The butthole is. Did you know that? I bet you didn't know that. Right? The butthole and the umbilicus connect first, and then everything else grows from that. Like, the very first thing of you that started was your base chakra. Link to the heart. Oh my goodness. What are you even talking about here? Hence, the head is subject to in an absolute manner to astral influence, and evidences its several attractions by its diverse protuberances. The final word of phrenology, that's the other word, is to be found, therefore, in scientific and purified astrology, the problems of which we point out to the patience and good faith of scholars. According to Ptolemy, the sun dries up and the moon moistens. And that is what that is talking about, is the principles of the subject, right? There's fire, air, water, and earth. They are each assigned to one of the things, right? And the sun is assigned to fire, the moon is assigned to water. The fire and moistening, the drying up and the moistening, that has to do with herbs, right? Thyme, for instance, is a drying agent, whereas we have other ones that are moistening agents, and the different plants have different properties. And in alchemy, you determine those, right? If you bite into something and it's fiery, right, or if you bite into something and it's sweet or smooth or whatever, it's assigned these properties, and that is what this is talking about. In the same manner, right? The sun dries up and the moon moistens. That's got to do with alchemy more than anything. According to the Kabbalists, the sun represents rigorous justice, while the moon is in sympathy with mercy. It is the sun which produces storms, and by a kind of gentle atmospheric pressure, the moon occasions the ebb and flow, or, as it were, the respiration of the sea. All right, there's a couple of things here. Justice and mercy are inextricable, right? There is no justice if mercy is not considered. There is no mercy if justice is not considered. They are inseparable and therefore not separate entities in the sky. There's that. The sun, you can say the sun produces storms fairly accurately. There is a direct correlation between the magnetic activities on the sun and the tropical depressions that develop into hurricanes. There is a direct correlation. There's also a direct correlation to the magnetic emanations from the sun and earthquakes and volcanoes. This is science. This is not speculative, even though modern science has not fully recognized this. Again, I kick you back to the Thunderbolts Project, as well as, it used to be, what do they call him? What's Ben calling himself now? It used to be Suspicious Observers, and he changed the name, and I don't remember what it is right now, but it is linked on my page. You can definitely find it there. Ben Davidson. Ben has done the work on this in large part in conjunction with some other scientists. They have an app that can predict earthquakes to a fairly reliable degree. Where it's going to be, the magnitude that it's going to be, and it is based upon the sun. There is a correlation there. You should definitely check that out if that interests you. The moon does cause the ebb and flow, that is due to magnetics, which doesn't, like, the magnetics of the moon does affect the atmospheric pressure, right? That's why I said that the planets probably do have some impact upon you being formed, much less about where you were born or how you were born or when you were born, but much more, almost certainly, about how you were conceived and the formation of you in the uterus. And so the moon does occasion ebb and flow. That is true. The respiration of the sea, even, that is true, right? In and out, positive or negative flexation, that is everywhere. Back to the text. We read in the Zohar, one of the great sacred books of the Kabbalah, that the magical serpent, the son of the sun, was about to devour the world when the sea, daughter of the moon, set her foot upon his head and subdued him. That is entirely possibly talking about something in the sky, right? I have some unconventional beliefs. One of those is the 12,000-year disaster cycle. One of the signs of the 12,000-year disaster cycle, in my estimation, is going to be an astrological sign which resembles a serpent in the sky, right? It may even be considered the son of the sun because it will come around the sun. And it is entirely possible that the moon interfered in some way between us and them. So this can be talking about something in the celestial that actually happened once upon a time, and much less the allegory that is implied here. That is not certain. That is speculative. Take it with a grain of salt, but there are significant reasons for believing such. 12,000-year disaster cycle. For this reason, among the ancients, Venus was the daughter of the sea, and Diana was identical with the moon. Hence, the name of Mary signifies star or salt of the sea. What is the correlation there? I didn't do the word study on Miriam, or, Moses' sister. And so I'm not sure. But these are different things, right? Venus, sea, Diana, moon, different names, different attributes. Signifies a star or salt of the sea, different things. To consecrate this Kabbalistic doctrine in the belief of the vulgar, it is said in the prophetic language, the woman shall crush the serpent's head. Jerome Cardon, one of the boldest students and beyond contradiction. Whoa, talk about big words. Beyond contradiction. How dare you doubt? That's a big one. That's a big one. Beyond contradiction, the most skillful astrologer of his time, Jerome Cardon, who, if we accept the legend of his death, was a martyr in his faith in astrology, has left behind him a calculation by means of which anyone can foresee the good or evil fortune special to all the years of his life. Okay, hold on. We are going to pop this out. I'll be right back. I'm going to look that up because if this is there, right, has left behind him a calculation by means of which anyone can foresee the good or evil, we're going to find it. And we will do a study upon it because that is the evidence that I was looking for talking about earlier, right? If there is something that we can actually go to verify things, then I definitely am interested in that. So that's going to make it to the list of books to explore. His theory was based upon his own experiences, and he assures us that the calculation never deceived him. To ascertain the fortune of a given year, he sums up the events of those which have preceded it by 4, 8, 12, 19, and 30. Oh boy. Damn it! The number 4 is that of realization. 8 is the number of Venus, or natural things. 12 belongs to the cycle of Jupiter and corresponds to successes. 19 has a reference to the cycles of the moon and of Mars. The number 30 is that of Saturn, or fatality. Okay, so I am much less interested. We're still going to investigate it, but I'm much less interested now that I know that it takes complicated mathematics. Thus, for example, I desire to ascertain what will befall me in this present year of 1855. I pass in review the decisive events in the order of life and progress which occurred 4 years ago. The natural felicity or misfortune of 8 years back, the successes or failures of 12 years since, the vicissitudes and miseries or diseases which overtook me 19 years back from now, and my tragic or fatal experiences of 30 years back. Then, taking into account irrevocably accomplished facts and the advance of time, I calculate the chances analogous to those which I owe already to the influence of the same planets, and I conclude that in 1851 I had employment which was moderately but sufficiently remunerative, with some embarrassment of position. In 1847 I was violently separated from my family with great attendant sufferings for mine and me. In 1843 I traveled as an apostle, addressing the people and suffering the persecution of ill-meaning persons. Briefly, I was at once honored and proscribed. Finally, in 1825, family life came to an end for me, and I engaged definitely in a fatal path, which led me to science and misfortune. All right, so this is working backwards, right? I was violently separated from my family with great attendant sufferings for me and mine and me. Right? This was after he was an apostle and suffering the persecutions of ill-meaning persons. Interesting. If you remember, he took a vow to the church, right? And then he forsook that vow to find a partner who was significantly younger than him. We'll put it that way. And that was probably between 1843 and 1847, right? I'm not sure the actual dates. I was violently separated from my family. His wife left him, from my understanding. Right? Family life in 1825 came to an end for me, and I engaged definitely in a fatal path which led to science and misfortune. That was when he went into the church. And so these are past events, right? It is really easy to read into the past. Let's see what he says about the future. I may therefore suppose that I shall, this year, experience toil, poverty, vexation, hard exile, change of place, publicity, and contradictions, with some eventuality which will be decisive for the rest of my life. Okay, so what you were saying here is that because in 1825 your family life came to an end, and in 1843 I traveled as an apostle with ill-meaning persons, and then in 1847 I was violently separated from my family. In 1851 I had employment, but it was moderately sufficiently remunerative, but embarrassment of position. And because of those things, this thing has to happen. And I don't know about all that. I mean, there were several decisions that you made along the way that led to where you are. Every indication in the present leads me to endorse this forecast. Now, I would endorse this forecast for you as well. I mean, without knowing anything but your history. I may therefore suppose that I shall this year experience toil, poverty, vexation, hard exile, change of place, publicity, and contradictions. Now, what are you engaged in? You are engaged in writing a book about magic, which is factually incorrect. I mean, we have seen several times factual incorrectness. Not even talking about the speculative incorrectness, but factually incorrect about several things. Well, that is going to lead to publicity and contradiction straight off the top. Everybody is going to experience toil. Poverty, sometimes. Vexation, absolutely. Everybody is going to be vexed at some point. Hard exile, that's a little bit weird. Right? That one's a little bit harder to explain. Right? I'm not trying to just dismiss it, but without much more information. Change of place, publicity, and contradictions, right? These are not hard to say, right? You're writing a book about magic in a time where magic was starting to become a thing that people talked about, right? Theosophy's kicking off. People are finally breaking free, both from the clutches of the Catholic Church and the Protestant churches, and starting to get some individual thought into the mix. But it is still quite provincial, right? There's still a whole lot of you will toe the line, and so the market is not as grand for a book of this type as it probably will be in a decade or two. Right? Evidence. And so these are things which happen in everyone's life, right? Toil, vexation, hard exile even, right? That's a breakup, right? That one's a weird phrase. Change of place happens all of the time, especially if you are expecting to be poor, or if your life experience is that you are going to be poor. Because, let's be honest, Mr. Levi was not a manifester. He was not somebody that was pulling positivity into his life for damn sure. And so it is entirely predictable that someone with a victim mentality mindset is absolutely going to be a victim. Every indication in the present leads me to endorse this forecast. Hence, I conclude that for myself and for this year, experience completely confirms the precision of Cardan's astrological calculus, which, furthermore, connects with the climacteric years of ancient astrologers. Now, these particular numbers, they don't have a whole lot of bearing on anything, right? This is numbers just arbitrarily assigned. 4, 8, 12, 19, 30. 4 is that of realization, is almost correct, right? 1, there is a choice to be made. 2 is making that choice. 3 is learning about the choice that you just made. 4 is understanding that choice. And so, in part, it is. 4 is the number of realization. It is the understanding of the lesson, right? At least the first one. 8 is the number of Venus or natural things. Now, 8 to me is a very important number. If you don't know, I think that there is a number of manifestation. It is 1, 3, 8. Right? That is for a reason. 1 is the divine, the divinity. All is 1. 3 is the Trinity, right? Body, spirit, soul. These are the 3 parts that make up manifestation. And the physical mechanic by which it happens is 8. You have 7 internal chakras, 1 external chakra. You can align your internal with the external, as above, so below, creating the reality that you want. 1, 3, 8 is the number of manifestation. I have a reason for those numbers. This, not so much. 8 is the number of Venus, or natural things. 12 belongs to the cycle of Jupiter, says who, and for why. Why is 12 for Jupiter? What makes that happen? It's not the 12th planet. It doesn't even have anything 12 related to it. Why did you just pick 12 for Jupiter? Corresponds to successes. Sure, why not? 19 has references to the cycles of the moon. Why? Again, and of Mars. Not just the moon, but the moon and Mars. Why? That's arbitrary. 30 is out of Saturn or fatality, because those things are related. Right? These numbers are completely arbitrary. They don't make any sense, and you can find correlation. You can find correlation in all kinds of things. That doesn't mean that it is a cause. Correlation and causation are not the same. All right. This term signifies a range in scales or calculated on the degrees of a scale. Johannes Trithemius, in his book on secondary causes, has very curiously computed the return of fortunate or calamitous years for all the empires of the world. In the 21st chapter of our ritual, we shall give an exact analysis of this work, and so I will hold off on judgment until then. One even more clear than the original, together with a continuation of the labor of Trithemius to our own days, and the application of his magical scale to contemporary events, so as to deduce the most striking probabilities relative to the immediate future of France, Europe, and the world. It would be interesting to see how that played out since 1825. Once we get there and we go through the investigation, I may wind up doing a little bit extra just to see how it played out in actual events, right? Just to see. We have the events now. We can look back from that time to this time and see. All of the Grand Masters in astrology, comets, according to all the Grand Masters in astrology, comets are the stars of exceptional heroes, and they only visit the Earth to signalize great changes. I don't know that the correlation has been evidenced from that. It's possible there are great events happening all of the time, and some of those will coincide with comets. The planets preside over collective existences and modify the destinies of mankind in the aggregate. The fixed stars, more remote and more feeble in their action, attract individuals and determine their tendencies. Sometimes, a group of stars combine to influence the destinies of a single man, while often a great number of souls are drawn by the distant rays of the same sun. When we die, our interior light, in departing, follows the attraction of its star. That is a guess. You do not know that. And thus it is that we live again in the universes. Now, I believe in the eternal life. I believe you came from Source, that you will return to Source. That is speculative. Right? Nobody knows about the hereafter. Everybody has their guesses, me included. I talk about them often, but I make sure that you know that it is speculative. Right? I believe that we came from somewhere and that we will return to somewhere, that we have a purpose here. We are created intentionally to be here right now. Right? And so, that, however, is an assumption. That is something that I assume based on my personal experiences. This is an assumption. You do not know what will happen when you die. It is possible that you go to this star or that star or this star. That's possible. I don't believe so. I don't believe that you're going to any star in particular until you return to Source, and then maybe you're assigned to go to that star or this star or that star. And that's where your experience will be enhanced as a soul. Right? I do not believe we are alone in the solar system. Solar system is the wrong word. I don't believe that we're alone in the universe. It is extremely wasteful if so, and as far as I am aware, God is not wasteful. Everything serves a purpose, even bad things. And so, there has to be something out there somewhere. Now, what level of development it has, whether it visits us or not, all of that is up for debate. But the probability of life out there is much less up for debate in my opinion. And thus it is that we live again in other universes, where the soul makes for itself a new garment, analogous to the development or diminution of its beauty. This is taken from the Bible. There is no reason to believe that. For our souls, when separated from our bodies, resemble revolving stars. That, again, is an assumption that we cannot make. They are globules of animated light, which always seek their center for recovery of their equilibrium and their true movement. And that is exactly the same, right? This is a possibility, but it is not a certainty. Before all things, however, they must liberate themselves from the folds of the serpent, that is, the unpurified astral light which envelops and imprisons them, unless the strength of their will can lift them beyond its reach. The immersion of the living star in the dead light is a frightful torment, comparable to that of Mezentius. I'm not familiar with that. Therein, the soul freezes and burns at the same time. And has no means of getting free except by re-entering the current of exterior forms and assuming a fleshly envelope, then energetically battling against instincts to strengthen that moral liberty which will permit it at the moment of death to break the chains of earth and wing its flight in triumph towards the star of consolation which has smiled light upon it. Alright, so we see that victim mentality that I was talking about, right? The very concept that this is a prison is victim mentality. The very concept that you are chained to the earth in an endless cycle of repeating torment, victim mentality. That someone else had to die for you to be forgiven from sin, victim mentality. Victim mentality is casting upon something or someone else the thing you should be taking responsibility for yourself. And your life is your responsibility. You are assigned here by the divine with a purpose, and that purpose is not to be imprisoned. It is not even to overcome, right? You are meant to engage in the world in a balanced manner, not to abstain from all of the vices, not to partake in all of the virtues to exclusion, right? It's about finding the balance between the two. That is intrinsic to life, in my estimation. We are here voluntarily, according to my spiritual revelation. You don't have to believe it. It can be speculative. But what I have experienced in my spiritual path, right, I had a spiritual experience. I was pulled out of my body, held by something that I never saw, and I got to see the creation of the entirety of everything. That is speculative. It happened inside of my mind, or however that mechanic worked. I got to see the interconnectedness of all the people, how every action actually has a consequence, and it can reverberate farther down the line. Everything that happens is to teach you a lesson, to help you to grow as a soul, to not overcome the world, but to assimilate it, to fully engage here in your life to the best of your abilities. That is the soul's purpose. Not to abstain so that you can get eternal life on the other side. You've already got it. Your soul, the part that is inside this 5D temple, is eternal. The soul, the body will wither away. It will go. The spirit will return to here. But the soul, the individualized piece of divinity that was given to you to navigate 5D space, goes back to the Creator, regardless. Now, what happens there? That's entirely speculative, again. But I believe that once we get there, that moment when we die, everything becomes clear. We're like, oh, that's what I was supposed to learn from that. Well, shit, let me go back and try that again, right? To me, in my experience, through spiritual revelation, that's how it works. Not this break the chains of the earth, right? I have to achieve eternal life by killing this man. Come on, bro. Following this clue, we can understand the nature of the fire of hell. And I say so very often, there is no hell in the Old Testament. It is not a thing. Go back, read it yourself. Which is identical with the demon or the old serpent. No, it's not. Right? The demon or the old serpent was cast into hell. They're not the same thing, right? It may be in the same place, according to this completely made-up thing in the New Testament, but that they're not the same thing. You don't get cast into the demon. You don't get cast into the old serpent. Identical means the same. We can gather also wherein consists the salvation and reprobation of men, all called and all successively elected, but in small number, after having risked falling into the eternal fire through their own fault. And again, no eternal fire. Such is the great and sublime revelation of the Magi, a revelation which is the mother of all symbols, of all dogmas, of all religions. We can realize already how far Dupuy was mistaken in regarding astronomy as the source of every cultus. It is astronomy, on the contrary, which is sprung from astrology, again, wrong, and primitive astrology is one of the branches of the Holy Kabbalah. The science of sciences, definitely wrong, and the religion of religions, emphatically wrong. That one I will stand on. Not even speculative, right? Not even speculative. It is based upon a lie and therefore cannot be anything but a lie. Nothing had to die for you to be forgiven from sin is an intrinsic misunderstanding all the way back into this particular antiquity. Right? There was no scapegoat that had to die for you to be forgiven. No turtle dove, no goat, no cow, no chicken, no person. Nothing had to die for you to be forgiven from sin except your sin. Hence, upon the 17th page of the Tarot, we find an admirable allegory. A naked woman, typifying truth, nature, and wisdom at one and the same time, turns two ewers towards the earth and pours out fire and water upon it. All right, so this is talking about the star, and it is different now than it was then, right? Now it is pouring out two jugs of water, one on the land, one on the earth. 1 foot is one in the land and one in the water. 1 foot is on the earth, 1 foot is in the water. It is a melding together of the natures, right? You're in the air, standing on ground, standing on water, mixing together the waters, right? It is about abundance and all of these things. And so this description is not correct in our current tarot. Like, I've got it here, but I've shuffled it several times and I'm not trying to dig it out right now. Thanks, Jason, by the way. But this is talking about the star card, and this is not the description of it as we have it now. Above her head glitters the septenary, starred about an 8-pointed star. Septenary means 7. That of Venus, symbol of peace and love. The plants of the earth are flourishing around the woman, and on one of them, the butterfly of Psyche has alighted. The emblem of the soul is replaced, in some copies, by the sacred book of a bird, which is a more Egyptian and probably a more ancient symbol. Hold on, it can be more ancient. Everything came from the Kabbalah. It can be more ancient. It's not possible. In the modern tarot, the plate is entitled the Glittering Star. It is analogous to a number of Hermetic symbols and is also in correspondence with the blazing star of Masonic initiates, which expresses most of the mysteries of Rosicrucian secret doctrine. Yeah, there may be a good bit of correlation there. That is going to bring us to the end of the study of astrology. Now, this is one of those that I'm sure is really going to piss some people off, and while I hold some unconventional beliefs and I have a tendency to step on toes when I relay those, I do not apologize for it, right? It is not intentional, but I do not apologize for it. I feel like the points I brought up here are valid, right? He has a tendency to use big words where they don't belong, right? That is those things I try to refrain from as much as possible because they're really big words. Everything includes a lot of things. All includes a lot of things, and there are always exceptions to the rules, so I tend to err on the side of caution. I try not to be too firm about things that can be subjective. Right? Astrology is entirely subjective. In my experience, through my studies, I have found no reason to believe in any correlation whatsoever with any of these things. There are things that we can read into them and which we want to read into them. The same is true for tarot to a large degree, the difference being the individual correlative effects. Now, you couldn't have done that 30 years ago, right? Before the advent of YouTube, and YouTube's only like 20 years old now, but like you couldn't have done what I did to correlate the tarot 20 years ago. The source material simply wasn't there. But what happened there, right? I was researching on YouTube the tarot just to see if there was any correlation. And I made a decision, like there's so many boxes that pop up on your screen whenever you go to YouTube, right? We can go over here and look at it. See all the boxes, right? There's a box, right? And I would say this box, right? This box on the right, that's going to be the one. Before I even click on home, this box right here, if something pops up and it says Gemini or Pisces, because both of those are related to me, I'm going to click on it and we'll see what it says. And then I would change the location of the box. And I just realized I am not showing you this. Anyway, these are the boxes, right? I would start at this box over here, and then I would choose this box, or I would choose this box, or I would choose this box, completely at random. And I would only click on the ones that popped up in that box. And I would watch and see what they said. And all of the Geminis correlated. Like, not a perfect one for one, but damn close, right? Let's say there was a 8 spread or a 9 spread, right? 9's pretty standard. There's 3, 3, and 3. Out of those 9 cards pulled from this deck, right? There's 78 cards in this deck. They would pull 9 cards. Those 9 cards would be almost exactly the same 9 cards that were pulled from this other box. And then those 2 would correlate with a 3rd one, and a 4th one, and a 5th one. Almost exactly. Not exactly, but pretty damn close. It would pull almost exactly the same cards for all 9 slots. Sometimes they were in different orders, sometimes they were not. They would be given the exact same meanings by the tarot readers. That's a little bit of correlation, right? Not conclusive, not something that you can bet your life upon, but definitely something that you should be paying at least a little bit of attention to. I do not have that for astrology, and I looked, right? I didn't find the correlations. I didn't find that these 5 different people in 5 different places uploading almost at the exact same time, correlating. That didn't happen with astrology. It did with tarot. I am open to ideas. I am willing to readjust the things that I believe according to the new information presented to me. If you don't believe that, you didn't watch the Bible study. I am open to these ideas, but I am not so open that I will just be taken in because I want them to be true. If they do not prove out evidentially through objectionable observation, then I'm going to dismiss it. Maybe not totally. I do keep an open mind. But for the most part, astrology has proven to be much, much less reliable than the tarot. That's not up to me. That is just what I have observed. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there is that correlation, but I haven't found that at all. And so for me, astrology is kind of a no-go, right? There are some things that you can pull from it, right? But most of it's not. most of the actual physical mechanics don't play out correlatively. Now, I'm going to check out this guy, Jerome Cardan, and see if he did have something that would allow me to get some corroboration. Right? We'll go back through the history, not on channel probably, because it will be long and boring, but I'm going to see if it plays out because I want to know. I am interested, and if it does, we will make a video about it. Now, if it doesn't, I might not. It depends on what the source material is. But if it does play out, you will hear about it. I will be out here just as loudly and as vocally supporting it as I am against it. That is not to say that there is no value to be drawn from it, right? Self-identification is a big, big influence on everything. How you identify yourself determines where you're going. The things that you speak about yourself determines your life. And so it is entirely possible that if you believe in astrology enough, you can create things for yourself. I don't doubt that that is a possibility. The objection of, the objective observation part is important to me. If you like what I'm doing over here, let me know down below. Give me a like, a share, a follow, throw me a comment. If you agree or disagree with anything that was stated, put it in the box down below, and if it remains respectful, it gets to remain up. If there is another work you would like to see me discuss in the manner that we are doing here, drop that in the box as well. And if you really like what I'm doing over here, hit me with that super thanks. Consider joining for a membership or picking up a copy of my book. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete, just the way that you are. And this has been Pitt State. Peace.